You're live.
I think we're Friday. Thank God it's Friday. And this is the Senate Transportation Committee. We're a little late, but not too bad. And we are talking about municipal assistance programs, or at least part of it.
What's that?
You're all set.
All
Your
right.
name, rank, serial
Yeah.
number,
Yeah.
and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Joel Perigo. I am the Municipal Assistance Program Manager at VTrans. So I'm just going to step through the programs that are under municipal assistance and show up in the budget for this year, for the next year at least. So I've labeled these or ordered them by the tab numbers that they show up in the white book. The first being tab 5F, which is the Park and Ride program, which is not necessarily a grant program. There is a component, there is a grant component in it, but this is mostly the state's assets, park and rides. And so in this year's upcoming budget, you'll see a couple projects, one in Sharon and one in Manchester, taking up the majority of that funding. Those are both expansions of existing facilities, adding 10 spaces in Sharon and 16 additional spaces in Manchester. There is an ongoing update to the park and ride plan. We've been working off on a plan that I think was completed in 2015, which identified areas of need, and we've basically addressed all those areas at this point. And so that update is, I believe it's going to be posted at any given day at this point. And so that'll be sort of our roadmap for the next 10 years or so. There's a couple line items in the budget as well. If we were to identify projects throughout the year, there's a future park and ride PE line. There's some preventative maintenance funding in there. And then there is a line item in there for the municipal park and ride grant program, which has been popular over the years, but in the last few years, we're only receiving like 2 or 3 applications, almost funding 100% of projects each year. But with those municipal park and rides, we've added like 1,519 spaces to the network at this point.
That's great. So that's great. So the 1519 is from the municipal, and then there's the state ones are additional.
In addition to that, correct. And then we have a pretty robust park and ride website that has all the different locations, all of the amenities that are there, with
that
public transit available.
Municipal and
Does not include the municipal ones in there. It may include the location, but it doesn't include all of the other information.
And the federal monies of this is pretty secure, hopefully.
So yeah,
Or do it fast.
yeah. This comes out of our formula funds, and park and rides. I think generally 100%.
That's what it
federally
shows here.
funded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
great.
Good, thank you.
And because we don't have any new facilities recently, I kept a picture of Williston in here that was actually completed last year. So.
Did the issues that we had with the bus and that stuff get fixed?
Still working through. We just met with the town a few days ago.
Okay.
So we have a plan in place
what's
with
that?
the town.
On this park and ride, where the bus goes and where the sidewalk is, and there was issues around sidewalks, mainly sidewalk.
It's just outside of the frame of this picture. Folks that are using the transit facilities that they jump off at the park and ride and want to get to the other side of Route 2A, and there's no crossing at this point.
There's no sidewalk.
So is this Sharon or
This is Williston.
this is Willis?
We literally met with the town on Wednesday and believe that we have a solid plan in place. And so hopefully soon enough.
And is that link not stopping? The link bus stopping there?
It's stopping there
Oh, it is, okay.
and it's letting people off and it's picking people up, but there's just no crossing of.
Dropping them off at a park and ride, but not if you want to get to any of the jobs that are
Right.
down the road.
Right,
So is that bus gonna continue that service?
as far as I know, yeah.
Well, they did cut one of the ones that stopped at Wallstead. And maybe they just still have one.
So so all of this, including the maintenance, is, federal?
Not in the maintenance piece of it. This is,
So
this is,
You have preventative maintenance, the 325. So, so to build these is federal.
yeah, preventative maintenance is call it major preventative maintenance becomes eligible for federal funding. So paving of, that's essentially what it is in this line item, paving of the existing surface.
So the paving of this from an existing service is federal.
Correct,
Okay,
yes. Yeah,
we just have to plow.
routine maintenance and those sorts of things are state funded.
And the local government, I think, is the authority, the legal, like law enforcement authority, I think. Cause that's been an issue by me is who, I mean, because sometimes people will put a camper there and plug in.
So is the 150 for municipal parking rides, is that state dollars or is that,
That is state dollars.
that's all state dollars?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's, so there's no, okay, go ahead.
The shared park and ride, how are you expanding? Be going into you're gonna take over to the horseshoe pit?
So the horseshoe pits are staying.
Okay.
I think they're being moved. They were a valuable asset to the area. Yes,
Yeah.
I've heard a lot about that. So it is going that direction, but they
It's that.
are accommodating the horseshoe pits.
There's a well-maintained horseshoe. I don't know what you call them. There's like a 10 of them there. It's like you could have a whole horseshoe.
Where, in Williston?
Sharon.
Sharon,
They're expanding it. So I was like, the only way they could expand it would be taking up the horseshoe pits and then you wouldn't be able to play horseshoes. Boy.
Which people expect at a park and ride.
so I'm feeling like a field trip coming. When
Yeah,
you know,
field trip.
like in May, when it's good weather, you know, we can.
I have a personal affiliation to the Sharon Park and Ride because that's where I met my wife the first time.
Wow.
We were parking.
Were you playing horseshoe?
I don't. Yeah, if we weren't on camera, we'd got just a little more.
It does sound like a field trip.
Yeah. Bring your horseshoes.
So
Unless AFT destroys the horseshoe.
that was your first outing with your wife?
Not first outing, but I was carpooling with others down to the White River Co-op, and so we met there. So the first time we saw each other was at the park and ride, getting in a car together to drive down to White River Junction.
Okay.
Yeah,
We still lost.
so that's
Yeah.
a good advertisement for using park and ride.
Yeah, park and rides.
Yeah.
You could find the love of your life.
Yeah, you never know.
Becca knows all about it.
He's just telling us about the first time he ever met his wife was in a park and ride.
She knows, because then we went to her co-op.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's a magical place.
Park.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you tell your parents?
Her parents?
I would tell her parents first.
A commitment to sustainability.
So we haven't gotten far. So you
Great.
Water.
Well, I walked, so I didn't carpool. I was a
Oh.
pedestrian to get here, so thank you for your sidewalks.
So how many park and rides have we got on schedule since this is mostly looking back?
It's just the horseshoe pit.
Really just the two this year. Sharon and Manchester.
Yeah.
And then I think there's, I think there's like 2, 3, 4 municipal projects ongoing as
Do we
well.
sell tickets to the horseshoe pit in Sharon?
I don't actually know if it's,
Who owns it?
who owns and maintains that exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure.
And it's right beside the parking lot? Oh,
Yeah, your parking, you're looking at the horseshoe facilities.
The church there does.
It could be part of the.
Yeah.
They have tournaments and things, I guess, there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they got plenty of
The
parking.
chair wants. The chair wants us to go.
Okay, well, we have a great new gas station too, down the corner.
In the parking ride?
It's just a short walk as a pedestrian too.
All right, so.
Keeps trying to move us on.
The next is TAG 5G is the bike ped program. It shows up in this year's budget as a $21+ million expenditure. I will note that almost half of that, I think 10 million of that is from the South Burlington Raise grant for the pedestrian bridge over the interstate. So that's a large expenditure you'll see in the.
Is
in the budget.
any of this on hold from the feds?
No, none of this is done. Well, I guess besides that particular grant, the Raise grant at this point, we've been told that we are unable to obligate those funds at the next phase, which would be construction for that particular project. Remember if there's any others in there?
Because it's under review, not permanently, not.
That's the last guidance we have from Federal Highway is that it's on hold and we can't obligate as of yet.
Additional obligation.
Additional obligations. So they're still advancing the project in preliminary engineering, moving into contract plan stage, basically getting the project ready to bid. And at which time we will make that request. It's unknown whether we will get the obligation on it.
Can you explain about the small scale grant program, 50/50, state and local?
Yes. Yes, so we have one solicitation that'll actually go out very soon here, usually in April. That goes out, there's two components of it. One of them is the federally funded portion, which is federal highway funds. It comes out of our formula funds, so it's funds that are competing with bridge funding and roadway funding and everything else. And then the other component of that is this small scale grant program, which is state funds and only eligible for construction. So it's not funding that we're giving for, there's no design. These are simple projects. They're not like complex line and grade type projects. Some of them, literally the towns put something on a sheet and we get a simple environmental review. If they're on the state system, they have to get an 1111 permit, but they're made to be like little gap projects. That if you had a gap in your sidewalk, a few 100 feet, and the share on those is 50% state, 50% local.
And how many of, are you, do you use all the funding? Just all the.
Yeah, that's in that testimony that I provided a couple months ago now.
Okay.
And I can dig that back up. That all that information was in there, how many applications we're receiving and how many we're
Okay.
awarding and the amounts.
And I probably asked about the timing because I know it's hard for municipalities to work quickly and to get the
So
application to the state.
So we typically are providing at least 6 weeks of time. Is that what you mean during the
Yeah.
application period?
Yeah, and maybe I just want us to know that 6 weeks is really difficult for municipalities to get something approved. Some towns only meet select board just meets once a month. So it's really challenging. And so if the municipalities remember, if April comes and they say, gosh, I wish we could do this, but then they just don't get it done. They have to remember the next April, but a lot of times you have different people then.
Yeah.
So it would just be really helpful. And I think you did have some sort of notification that was earlier than April. I think we talked about that, but it's just, I guess the reason I'm bringing it up again is because we're in my towns, we're working on railroad stuff. And I'm struck by how long it takes the TAC to do something. And I'm not criticizing them, but municipalities typically have many people who need to okay it. They're very deliberate, many of them, because they care a lot. It's their community. So it can take 3 months to get something that seems relatively simple to the state done. And you all have your annual schedules, which I totally understand you need to keep that going. But somehow the quickness, and it's funny that, because AOTs generally in the world are not known for being fast, right? Which is fine, because the process is like, 7 years away. But it's just, the municipalities really need time to digest and just so that they can participate in these kind of programs.
Yeah.
So I just want to keep mentioning that so that we're aware of that.
Noted. I will get back to my team for further consideration. I will say that, a lot of the projects that come through to us, especially in the larger federally funded, large scale projects, have typically been through a previous process of like a scoping effort or
Okay,
something
right.
like that. And if a town wanted to apply for a scoping only grant, which we fund 100% of those, so as long as they're eligible, that process is very simple.
Yeah, and those work great, because
Yeah.
so 1 year you do the scoping and then the
And then-
next year you apply for this one.
Exactly.
Yes, and if they get into that queue and if they have the same people there, over time.
Yeah.
That works well.
Yeah.
I agree.
The other type of application we receive a fair amount of is that a town will get an award. They'll start developing that project. And as time goes on, they realize that they don't have enough funding. They come back to us with another grant round. And again, that's a simple application. You're basically redescribing what we've already awarded. And, we try to make towns successful.
Yes.
By awarding
And you
those
do a
funds when
great
we
job.
can.
It's just,
And
yeah,
yeah, it's definitely a balance for
Okay.
sure.
thank you.
So in there, you'll see a list of projects, 67 ongoing projects, 46 different communities being represented. With 34 projects under construction in state fiscal year 26. Some various line items. We carry a line item for our bike head coordinator salary time so that it can be paid with federal funds. There's a line item for our continued support of the local motion bike ferry. There is a line item for an earmark along the LVRT. We did one round of on that, and we weren't able to give out all of funding. And then there's a line item for each year we do this, so we have to represent those dollars for future award, basically, for projects that are selected throughout the fiscal year.
Do you know how, what kind of support we provide for the bike ferry? Is it,
Just financial
like to pay for
for
operating?
them to run the bike ferry.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't have it, in front of me what we're providing each year, but I think that the term of this existing agreement, I think may be up after this year, I believe. But they own the boat,
The boat, yeah.
and this is just for them. Okay. And so all of every year we put our projects up on the website, and this is just a list of the projects that we provided funding for the last round, which would have been awarded late summer last year. So like I said, we're about to kick this process off again, soliciting for applications. And so some of these projects would show up in the White Book if they were programmed in time. Some of them may still be in that sort of limbo area. So you'll just see a general description of the project and the costs here. And the small scale ones that you asked about are on the lower end of the package.
The New Fane one is great. It's really important. It's a very heavily traveled area.
The next one is tab 5H, which is the Transportation Alternatives Program. The state fiscal year 26 proposal is for 6.4 million, supporting 52 ongoing projects in 48 different communities with 17 under construction. This is a federally funded program. TA is a set aside of our formula funds. So again, nothing on pause on these. Statute limits the maximum award to $600,000 of federal funds. And it's an 80-20 split, so 80% federal, 20% local. There's two components of the transportation alternatives. Well, there's two. By statute, we're required to take half of this funding, half of the annual appropriation that we get, VTrans, and award that under the municipal mitigation type projects. And then the remaining 50% we award under the other eligible categories with emphasis or preferential weighting of like head type projects. And historically, the majority of that other 50% are bike ped. Other eligible projects are like historic preservation, scenic overlooks. There's a few other categories. And we do a few of those, but not very many.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we, I've long thought that since we have a municipal town highway aid program that's based off the mileage of each community by the classes of roads, why don't we have that same style of funding for pedestrian thoroughfares, for bike, for ped, for all of that? Because a concern that I hear lifted up for my towns is grant applications are difficult. It's not consistent. We can't bake it into our already planned maintenance. So having a fixed amount of town highway aid is extremely helpful because it lets them plan year over year. So I'm wondering, is the reason that we use grants because it's a federal requirement, or could we transition these budgets to being a fixed amount that every community gets based on whatever formula we come up with that's consistent, that's not a grant process?
Yeah.
Or does it have to be a grant process, and why?
Yeah, so this particular program, Transportation Alternatives, does because it's mandated by federal highway. The bike ped program is a program that we've built internally. Yes, I mean, the answer would be yes, that is a possibility.
Okay.
Given the amount of funding right now that's being, awarded. I don't know what the formula would look like, but I'm just thinking if you spread that across 200 towns, 200 plus towns, or if that's what you're intending, it wouldn't be a tremendous amount each year going to a town. So, but yeah, so it could potentially be done under the bike ped program, but as it stands right now, not under transportation alternatives.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I see that salt sand shed. So it's good for us to know that can be used for that
Yes.
purpose.
So under so I don't have the enabling legislation in this presentation, but I think maybe I presented it earlier and I can certainly come up with it. It talks about pollution prevention, abatement, and that sort of thing. It doesn't say in the enabling legislation that salt sheds are eligible.
Mhm.
We've worked with our local division office, Federal Highway Division office, to determine that salt sheds are eligible. We put parameters in place to make sure that eligibility continues. Because as we were awarding these projects, I'll just say things were getting a little out of hand. Salt sheds were becoming much more than a salt shed. They were becoming equipment storage. They were becoming, potentially office areas, heated areas, power, this and that. So we put some parameters in place that basically limits the eligibility to a covered sand and salt shed.
Okay, that's fair. But I just wanted us to know because we were talking about that in another
Yeah.
aspect. So
Yeah, and there's another component of my presentation coming up that actually sort of mirrors that same. It's under a line.
Okay, so then just another question
Yeah.
on what I think would be in this grouping is could amenities for transit or trains be used? Could that be?
Only if it were related to pedestrian type
Okay.
facilities.
So like a bus stop needing a shelter. I mean, pedestrians walk to the bus stop. If it
And
coordinated with that.
Potentially, I don't know that we've ever looked into that potentially,
Okay,
as long as it's considered I'd have to look at how that's worded but it's basically any sort of bike and ped type facility.
Okay.
So,
Well, just
Yeah.
connections are important,
Yeah.
obviously, for different.
So
roads.
these alternatives are all grant driven.
Yes.
It would just be interesting that the one district isn't what I would consider a very large community.
Mm,
And the larger communities have a lot more capacity to submit grants.
mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The FY 22 per statute, when it says half of it needs to go from, that's a state statute or federal statute?
Yeah, so I put that in there because when the Clean Water Bill passed, it's been some time, and I can't remember exactly, but there was one year where legislature directed us to spend all of our TA set aside to the municipal mitigation category. And then it was like back and forth, and now in perpetuity, starting in fiscal year 22, it says 50-50.
So mainly they're talking about flood mitigation. But you could.
It's this category. It's like I said, it's that and then enabling legislation that I can't remember, but it's pollution prevention related to highway construction.
Including flood.
It could be including flooding, but flooding remediation is covered under our emergency relief program. But this could be mitigation type activities, correct?
Stormwater, for example.
Yeah, stormwater. I mean, we fund culvert projects, we fund stormwater projects, stormwater treatment projects, salt shed projects.
Go ahead.
How are grants handed out? I want, going back probably a few years, we used to have a committee that did that, legislative committee.
Right.
Is that still?
So there's no, the committee composition is not legislatively mandated any longer.
Okay.
The committee is typically folks from different groups within V-Trans, our environmental group, right-of-way group, our own municipal assistance group. We also include folks from the Clean Water, and DEC
Okay.
as part of the scoring. We include our active transportation group for purposes. It's been sort of difficult now because we almost have two separate scoring going on. We have this municipal environmental mitigation side. That's where we include the DEC Clean Water folks. And then we have the more traditional side. That's where we include our transportation like folks. Gotcha.
I think it's better that way.
If I could.
Better than having legislators.
Oh, yeah.
Addressing I don't know which exact project you were talking about with the large community salt shed, but I will say that we've had
Milton,
yeah.
and in my book, any community that's over 10,000 comes from a different gravitas than a small rural community of under 1,500 people.
Yeah, we have funded a lot of smaller towns. I would say the majority of the salt sheds that we funded have been in what I would consider a smaller town.
Mhm.
But yeah. So, and I'll just note too that this program, the set aside doubled when IIJA was passed. What had traditionally been about just over $2 million, is now 4.3, and each year the appropriation slightly climbs.
Will that fall off in 2 years?
Potentially.
If we went back to normal times with normal funding sources, in 2 budget cycles,
It potentially could.
you're right to draw.
Correct. This program has been around a long time, and has always, it was in the enhancement back in, probably when Senator Brennan's talking about the legislative committee, it was enhancements. So it's been around for my life in the 20 plus years, anyhow. And this is a list of the projects awarded in calendar year 24. So it would have been, and actually these projects were making It may come out today. New awards are being announced potentially today. They have to be done by the end of the month, so. So this is almost a year ago, these were awarded here.
do you send that award, whatever it is, list to us? Or can you send it to us?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
And they are hosted on our municipal assistance website, each of the programs. Has even like 7 or 8 years back of all the awards too, if you ever, but yeah, I'll send it along.
Thank you.
The next one is tab 6, rest areas. Not a lot going on with rest areas right now. The majority of the funding is for Guilford, the Welcome Center. Replace the stone paver walkways that were there that were all heaved up. So there's a couple other line items in there. This is a program that we collaborate with BGS on. VTrans is responsible for the transportation components, the parking areas, the walkways, and BGS is responsible for the buildings. The next two that I have are tab 19 and tab 20.
So just remind me, because it's been a few years,
Mhm.
rest areas is 50, what's the percent? Where does the money come from for the 1.2?
I'm not sure. Rob can help
Here's
you on that one.
one. So much general, so much transportation.
Looks like it's T-fund.
Did you say it was 100%?
So,
Federal-
well, it depends on, probably on the line item. So yeah, so all the funding that we are showing, there's some T-fund split, so I'd have to do some math to figure that out, but it's not very significant by the looks of it. I don't know, I'd have to look into it. So what is it?
I'll look in the book.
Okay,
I think they're really good, the rest areas. Yeah. Beautiful.
Maintenance is all still 100% us, right?
correct. Yeah, maintenance. Though we had an agreement with Federal Highway to do some of the major preventative maintenance under a previous experimental project, and we're working on moving that forward again. So that would be like roof replacements, those sorts of things. Construction of the buildings is federally eligible if you're doing a wholesale replacement of the building. But your typical maintenance
Plowing.
is all state funded.
Yeah.
Right. So tab 19 and tab 20 go together. Tab 19 is the town highway aid. 20 is the supplemental, which is just in areas where towns have more than 2 lanes on class 1 roads, so like South Bronx and things like that.
So why, when I'm looking, when in my mind, just traditionally, structures in class 2 roadway grant programs and this are direct aid to towns. Why internally within the budget at AOT are they separate? Because if I was going to think about helping towns and sending money directly back to towns, those are the 3 areas that I would add money to. And just structurally within the budget, you separate this from those. And I just wonder why you do that, why the agency chose to do that.
I can speak, so for this particular program, there's no application, so this one is direct payments at a quarterly basis.
No, I totally understand that.
And I-
But from my thinking
Mhm.
is if I wanted to do something to really help towns,
Mhm.
separate from that, you have, the bridges that are over 20 feet and they can apply and get the 80-20 match. That I can understand because of it's in the construction. But when I go to think about towns, and I say, if I wanted to do a package of things that, those would be these two plus those two would be the place that I would look at to add money to. And I just, in my small mind, in my head, go, why wouldn't I put those together?
And I don't have a good answer for that. The only thing I would say is that the two programs, the structures and the class 2 paving are more, they're state funds that are more
So
significant
are
than these are, correct. But
Yeah,
these are not,
And they're all three, all of those are all 100% state dollar.
correct. Yeah. Yeah, and all the other programs that I've previously spoke about were generally federally funded. With some state funding components of them. Yeah, and
I am interested just functionally in why that separation is created, because if I go to send somebody for towns to look at where I've done something to positively affect towns, I have to send them to a number of different places within the budget to pull it together. And I find that I don't understand.
We can get that information.
yeah, I would have to.
Yeah, just
check
if there's, if there's a functional reason, practical reason that I'm not seeing, fine. But I just find that interesting. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think you're hitting right on the reason I asked my question earlier, which was why grant versus aid in certain circumstances? Because I think that directly has created disparities between certain communities who have access to bike and pedestrian resources compared to communities that don't. And I don't actually know if it was an agency of transportation decision necessarily. I bet it was actually probably a legislative decision over time as we created these programs. We didn't make them a funding structure that was, you just get an amount of money for these projects. We kind of created those grant programs over a process of time. I do think that we should really investigate if that system is still working to meet the needs of our municipalities. So I was wondering if you had any thought on that. Do you think that a transition towards a type of program that was less grant-based and more just a funding formula how would that impact your work?
Do you have a thought?
Or
Sure.
maybe someone in a position who could comment on that would.
Yeah, Rob White, Project Delivery Bureau Director at the Agency of Transportation. One of the big distinctions I see is a lot of these grant funded programs have some federal component. And so they require, some process to be in place to award them in a fair way. And then there's requirements to report back on what was done, whether it's NEPA process, contracting, all those types of things, where a lot of times these programs where it's state funds and we're just giving it to the town, we're not checking up on them to see how they're using those funds because we don't necessarily have to because there is no federal component. So it is a lot easier for us to just sort of hand it over to them and let them use it appropriately.
Do any other states provide the resources of doing the check back and doing kind of that grant proposal work and doing it almost as like a block of money that then is distributed by a formula? Does that occur? Is that something?
It does occur. There are states that have a certification process for municipalities. Certainly it's something we've looked into in the past, but have never pursued. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
I mean, that, you know, we have just in municipal assistance, we have 15 full-time staff that manage probably on the, you know, 300 federal projects any given year. And they're providing a significant amount of guidance to municipalities in this oversight process to ensure the eligibility of those federal funds. So I mean, I could show you the layout of a project development process for federal project there's a lot to it, you know, and I feel like our staff is a valuable asset in that process for sure. But that doesn't address why the programs are separated throughout the agency. I get that.
Yeah, I think the main barrier our towns have articulated to us is their own staffing and their ability to apply and not miss the window of time every single year. So if there was a way to transition that burden to a already existing functioning group of state government, that would be ideal in my view, especially for our smaller communities. Okay, then the only other question I had was kind of on this topic, was because we are likely to see state dollars becoming much more important as federal funding lowers for some of these bike pedestrian programs. Do you expect that communities will be able to raise the funds themselves to meet the needs of projects? Or do you think if the grants were to be limited or go away, those projects just would never happen? Like, what do the grants, are towns, let me do another way to put this. Are towns going to do these projects without the grant funding, without the federal funding? Is there any room or capacity that you've seen? Are towns doing it now?
I would say generally probably not.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that the majority of I assume that the majority of the projects you see being constructed in, you know, pedestrian facilities are some way funded through these programs. As far as I understand it.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think we would be looking at some issues with like the complete streets framework, because that would be the box of it's not fiscally something they could do would be checked on every single project. So, okay, thank you.
Would be just helpful to know if there is a functional reason why they're separated. And they are all under one.
We have talked about that. Putting them all under one umbrella and just giving every town would get a block amount of money, you know, not described in different pots and let.
Well, you know, I want to, that I think is a little longer, and you know, before we did any of that, I'd want weigh in from the agency and we'd have to take testimony and all of that. But just maybe as a first step in getting feedback from the agency on that is bringing all the appropriations closer together with functionally. So when you know, when somebody sits in the chair to talk about municipal aid, I see that as the core of municipal aid. I now have to get somebody else to come in and talk about to get the picture, and if I wanted to focus the discussion, but I don't want to do anything that functionally puts us in a position where a functional reason that it doesn't work.
So we were only talking about this program. Are you going to talk about it?
I can, yeah.
This is the automatic one.
Yep, this is the automatic.
Yeah. So this is an appropriation based, yeah, so the towns get quarterly payments. They're automatically just made. There's no application process. They just have to certify that they're spending $300 per mile local tax revenues on their highways in order to receive this. They do that through our districts annually. And then the appropriation, the amount of the appropriation that each town receives is based on their certified mileage of class 1, 2, and 3 roads. And so by statute, 6% of that 30 million goes to class 1, 44% to class 2, 50% to class 3.
Yeah, so that's the annual certification that they do.
I think there's a series of certifications that they do. These mileages, the 300 per mile. They do a town plan. They show us where they spend how much their winter maintenance is, things like that.
Right. The one I'm familiar with is just a one pager.
It is. It's a pretty simple. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And then are there any towns that don't, when you say expend less than 300 or no less than $300 a mile?
No.
All of the towns?
All the towns are meeting that.
Okay.
Correct. All towns are getting this.
Good.
These
Okay,
numbers.
thank you.
Yes.
To the gores,
Excuse me.
the gores. So
I think if they have jurisdiction over roads and they have class 1, 2, or 3 miles, then they would.
Well, they have to do something
So-
to get it because they have to
you have to have a
truck or
truck.
borrow a truck. Yeah.
Road crews. Have you ever considered changing the percentage of the appropriation for each class of road? Because I will say that there is a noticeable difference in quality depending on the class.
So
of the road.
This has been this way a very long time, and my assumption is that 6% is because there's 6% class 1s out there,
Okay,
and 44% is because.
so it's okay, so it's not based off of the expected maintenance cost of each of those roads, because I assume a class 1,
Well,
there's more.
that may be factored in there as well.
Okay.
I mean, this is a long-standing number that I'd have to look into that,
Yeah,
where
that
it came from.
would be interesting to understand
Yeah.
because it does seem like, again, Hartford has the most road miles of any town in the state, and we have many different road types.
Mhm.
And the quality and need of maintaining a class 1 road is different than
Obviously.
the class 3. And there are communities that have class 4 roads who, they don't maintain them,
Mhm.
but they might be trails or what have you. And the debate of going from class 4 to class 3 can be very heated in communities. And I think that it would be interesting to understand.
I can look into this. Yeah.
Yeah, and we might want to hear from towns too about
Totally.
if they think that the proportions are reasonable.
No, the towns think the whole number is too small.
Exactly. Sure, definitely understand that.
So the next one is tab 22, which in your budget is a single line item called the Missile Mitigation Assistance Program. There's a lot sort of packed into it.
I think just back up to.
Sure.
And part of the reason I question where all the numbers are is in the past, the difficulty that has come is, are you better to give grant aid that goes out like this and everybody gets a little? And here would be the piece about grant aid versus are you better off to help a town when they have a big culvert in a big project to get over a hump? Or are you better to give base aid where they can build it in their budget each year to do that? And there's a push me, pull you around that, because the thing that blows it, particularly a smaller or medium-sized town, is that culvert that goes, it's $800,000 or $1 million, and they can't fix the road. And so that's the balance that you have to, and that's why when I structurally in here, get somebody in the chair and we talk about this, but I don't have those 2 grant programs that are really the big help out there. It's hard to have that balancing conversation.
Right. But we can, it's worth it.
Yeah, so, yeah,
Great.
okay, sorry.
That's all right. So tab 22 municipal mitigation is a single line item in the book. But under the municipal mitigation assistance program is actually 3 separate grant programs. The primary goal of this program is financial assistance to towns for their compliance with the MRGP and alignment with goals of the Clean Water Act. The Better Roads program, out of that $6.8 million is a $2.19 million appropriation. 440,000 of that is transportation funds, and 1.75 comes from the Clean Water Fund. Out of the 1.75 of the Clean Water Funds, 1 million of that is intended to be implementation type projects for municipalities in their compliance with the MRGP, and 750,000 a continuation of funding we received in the previous year for the road erosion inventories that are required under the permit. And by our estimates, this last 750,000 will get all of the towns complete in that process.
Wow.
The next program is the grants and aid program. We've been receiving $3 million for the Clean Water Fund for many years. That is a formula-driven program. It's based on not on their road mileage, but on their hydrologically connected road mileage. That's a definition in the permit. And the participation in that program, you can see in fiscal year 25 was 235 of 260 municipalities. These are fairly simple grants. They're not anything complex. They're, bringing road segments up to compliance with the permit. They're putting in the proper ditching, disconnection practices, cross culverts, adding gravel to make sure you have proper crown, check dams, things like that. What you see in the picture, really. So
Just, you've got those 2 programs totaling $55,190,000, right?
Yeah.
Where's the rest of the
The
money?
next page.
Okay.
I couldn't fit it all on one screen,
He's
so.
reading ahead.
So,
We should.
Yeah.
The page.
so I think that's it on those 2. And then, yes, the next page. So then there's 1.4 million that goes into the municipal highway stormwater mitigation program. Those are federal funds. So those follow the same eligibility as I mentioned earlier with the TA program. This is not required by federal highway. This is an election of funds from VTrans. We put this into this program. And so this is a supplement to those TA funds, and it does allow for towns to apply through the TA program. And if they need additional funding, they can come to the municipal highway stormwater program. There's no cap on these projects, but again, there's not a tremendous amount of money in there either. So, and then there is a component in there that we have to pay stormwater utility fees to South Belton, Colchester, Belton, and St. Albans, Wilson, St. Albans, Shelter.
Go ahead.
You get to pay.
We pay the
No,
municipalities.
I know, I'm just glad that VTrans
Yeah.
pays municipalities, but is that what's the proportion that you pay? Cause you give yourself a discount
It's
or the state gives you a discount? I think it's 65.
Is it a municipality?
that is a question that I would have to look into.
I'm pretty sure it's something like 65% and you pay for the interstate too. The state pays for the interstate, which is a big incentive for towns to install and do stormwater utilities, because our stormwater utilities that we have now are basically in places that have not complied with the EPA, but towns can do it on their own, and it's a really good source of revenue once you get it established. And one of the sources of revenue is this payment. You have it because you had it you
What
were
are you doing?
non-compliant.
What are you doing, Colchester?
Stormwater utilities, any impervious, you pay a fee for like $58 a year for,
A single family?
yeah, single family. home.
Yeah, yeah.
If you have it, like a driveway, the impervious surface or to your roof.
Roof.
Fixed too.
Roof, driveway,
So the state pays on just road.
On
mount.
their roads.
But they pay on state roads and federal roads. So if the interstate goes through the town, it's really helpful. It's
So we
good
can
revenue.
bill that off to the feds.
the feds pay that?
Well, the state pays it
The-
for the feds. I don't know where the state gets the revenue for it.
This,
Yeah, it's.
I'll have to look into it. I think these are,
You love your storm. Well, stormwater utilities. No, but it also just a little pitch. It helps reduce the taxes.
they're not federal.
Well, because
They're,
everybody
It might be
pays
clean.
it. So folks who don't
they're,
pay,
they're T funds.
folks who don't pay, property tax, if they're exempt, they still, if they impact the stormwater system, they still pay a stormwater fee. And it also gives them an incentive to reduce their impervious surface. So if they have a big, huge parking lot that they never use, and then they say, oh gosh, that's costing me money, they can reduce their fee by paying that. So it's a really good revenue source.
Well, so we pay on all of the interstates. But
You know, only the interstates that go through one of these
Through
towns.
these towns.
only one of those towns. Okay,
The town has to have a stormwater utility, so.
Right.
So, they are T funds. I'm
The,
jogging my memory enough to know that
the interstate or T.
the 275,000 are
Okay.
transportation funds.
Okay.
it's too bad we couldn't charge the feds for part of that.
Maybe we can.
Can you remind me your question on that so I can,
It wasn't a question. I just wanted them to be, well, I guess does that include the interstate?
Okay.
funds? Be the question. Yes.
If stormwater utility fees come up, Senator Harrison's gonna want to talk.
No, I'm just being, keep talking until we do it.
It is. But it's just up to the towns, like they could.
It is, but the barrier is that you need to establish the rates. So in your case, Colchester has some sort of,
Yeah, it's a.
amount that a single family home is, and then you use that single family home unit to measure everyone else. So you just have to the measurement initially.
Where the state would help them with ours.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, because you basically need an engineer to do that initial part. But then once it's done, it manages it, not itself, but it's a minimal.
I could ask our town if they savings was done properly, if they charge for the interstate that runs through town.
Well, yeah, and if they don't, then you should ask them. Yeah, I've talked to South Burlington a fair amount about it too,
Well, I don't,
because
yeah,
they have one.
yeah, true.
I think the only, just the picture on the left, this was Campbell's Hump Road in Duxbury that was funded as part of the municipal highway and stormwater mitigation programs. And then we're into the 10G reports. So these are projects that are new to the book in state fiscal year 26. So again, I showed you that award list earlier. The majority of these would be on that list. Some of these may be projects that didn't show up. They were in sort of in that limbo of we had awarded them, but not quite got them into the budget yet. These are all like pet projects. And then it's just a continuation of the same list. This is added projects for the Transportation Alternatives Program.
Dave Weathersfield.
And some of those we saw in the book already, right?
So these, right, so, well, no, so
Or-
these would not be, that's what this is. These are not they're new, sorry, they're new to the book this year.
Okay, so I
Right,
did see.
yeah. These are the municipal park and ride projects that briefly spoke about that are added as of this year. These are projects This is the portion of the report where projects have estimated costs have increased by more than 5 million or by more than 75% of the estimate from fiscal year 25. In the event of these types of projects, typically it's because they've received an additional funding source. South Burlington was, I think it was because it was added and then it got a supplemental funding source, and that's all pass-through funding. That's raise funding, and then they're reconnecting communities grant.
So because I thought it was canceled because of the increase, but they found money that.
They did find additional funding, correct? And it's all being passed through V-Trans. There's no state share in the
Is it
project.
like a congressionally directed spending or something?
It's not, it's separate of that. It's a discretionary grant program that came in with IIJA.
Is this, the first thing that comes to mind, is this one of its on hold?
Yeah.
So it's advancing at this point because they have obligation to move the PE phase forward and right of way phase. So it's still advancing. It could potentially be put on hold when they get to the next phase, which is obligated construction funds. That's where there's uncertainty at this.
So they'll own the right of way, but they won't be able to
Use it. Right. Naturally.
So does what you're suggesting in that, to get the right of way, is that all the, excuse me. Is that all of this or this is all plus construction?
Correct. This is everything.
The 14 is probably the right of way.
No, the 14 was their original estimate and the original funding that was flowing through V-Trans
Okay.
that they received as part of the RAISE grant. And then they applied to this Reconnecting Communities. I forgot the name of the grant program, but that's so they're a direct recipient, or they have the option of being a direct recipient through federal highway, but instead the funding is being
Because they
routed
thought it was
through.
going to be like 15 million and it turned out to be what?
Correct. Right. So that's the total project cost. It,
Is there a local match? Or because it's all grant money, you know that.
there is a local match, but it's not like your traditional 80-20 on this one. I'd have to dig into what it is. It's less than 20.
Right. Self-related is paying that.
Yes. And then the lower portion of the page here, these other projects are the Bennington one stands out to me. I'll have to look into that and maybe potentially correct that because that does not seem correct. But typically, these are projects that received a supplemental funding source, or I'm sorry, they received a second award. They started with an original estimate. They came back to us through the competitive grant process, and we awarded them additional funding, and so it went up. So this funding represents anything that we are providing to the municipalities. The 3.462 under Bennington, it's a bit of an outlier, and I'm going to look into that.
Can you remind me the terminology in front of the book, back of the book, what that means? I forget.
I knew somebody was going to bring that up.
I'll let Rob take that one.
Oh, man.
Well, front of the book is currently in our capital program, and it's an active project that we are spending funding on it. And then this is maybe where I need a little help. There's candidate projects and D&E projects.
Right, front of the book has any funds throughout the years, whether it's PE right of way or.
Or the next 4 years.
Right, within the next 4 years, the current budget year plus 3.
So, but where does the back of the book start?
That's a good question, and I don't know.
Okay,
There is no, it's.
Front of the book is an active project.
it's like that.
It's an
You
act.
want to be in the front of the, if you're in the
Yeah.
back of the book, we don't even know where it is. We don't even know where that front of the book is. let
Yeah,
alone-
that middle part of the book is specific to this current budget year. You know, that's what the
Right.
projects are, middle of the back of the book. Good question.
I just don't want to. Is that a new word project? The back.
I wish it was, because we could use some projects on the shelf.
Really? Well,
Well, the front of the book has projects on the shelf because you could have them 4 years away. That's kind of like you're putting it on the shelf
I
and
don't
then
know,
they
but-
can get moved.
Yeah, but usually in the, you're buying right away, you know, in design, you're.
Well, there's a lot of them in there that just have zero funding for 4 years. So it's just like, we put it on there, we want to get to it at some point. We're not,
Some of those projects that you're talking about maybe that they are complete too, and they were just in a closeout
Oh.
process.
Right.
So if I'm looking at Wordsboro down at the bottom,
what page is that?
Right,
you know, your, yeah, turn the next couple pages. No, you've got.
Right here.
Yeah, it looks like.
So that project was probably, I'd have to look into it, it was probably canceled,
Oh, so that was
Oh.
canceled.
right? We never spent any dollars on it, and it's coming out of the program.
So that is his point exactly, that one's. And then you've got one in Fairhaven sidewalks along Vermont 22A, which was the page back.
So I'd have to look into those wider, but my assumption is that they were probably canceled. The town chose not to pursue those projects.
And how, you know, if they show up in the book like that, how would we know?
Or do you-
From us sitting in this
Just by
position.
the zero.
On this report, you mean?
If you're looking in the book and seeing the zeros.
How
Well, what
would
I'm
we
saying
know
is that
it-
the
when
que-
it's not just sitting there waiting off into the future, or it's been canceled, how,
Or complete.
Yeah, so I think there's two questions being asked because there's this report said that it's no longer in the program. We spent $0. There's probably an explanation of that. Like I said, it was canceled of some sort, but the other one, that doesn't mean, so when you see the individual project listed in the front of the book under the program, and it says that
There's no money spent.
it says it's $0 being planned. Does it show you how much money has been spent in
No.
that report? Okay, so those projects could have potentially been just nearing completion. We haven't quite closed them out yet.
And you can tell that by then looking at the 10G report to see if it's there, right?
Potentially.
Theoretically, yes.
Just call you and ask.
That's another option. I will note that for next year, though.
no, thank you for pointing that out, Sandy, because I've looked at that and if it has the zero, I don't know if it's just sitting there or it's done.
Right, and that 10G report is different than the ones in the book,
Correct, that's what I'm saying. It's different, yeah,
but it's the same sort of issue.
right.
Yeah,
There's still no explanation as to why. I get it, yeah.
So but it does say on, like, I did jump ahead a little bit, well, maybe to that, yeah. That they're funded in 25 and no longer funded in 26.
Right, so there's quite a period there where we put the budget together in the fall.
Right.
And the fiscal year that we're in still extends another 8 months and the project is ongoing. And we anticipate that all the expenditures will occur in 25, but some of them may carry over to 26 just slightly. So,
So does that mean the project's done? No, I don't think that one's done.
which particular,
Fairhaven is talking about, like, the one that's zeroed out.
no, so that isn't, that's an actual expended amount, that $0. So that one indicates
So
to me
it hasn't
that
started.
it probably was canceled.
Okay.
Because it's coming out in fiscal year 26. It was in there in 25, but we didn't spend any money. So,
Okay.
And the 10G report is what the legislature asked you to do.
Correct.
So if we don't like that report, we can change it.
Yep.
Not suggesting that.
There was a change last year.
I was gonna say, I knew that-
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
there used to only be 3 reports, and then last year we were asked to add an additional report that sort of focused on preliminary plans for that estimate change. Because when we first start projects, a lot of times we don't know exactly what we're getting into and what the project's gonna be. And so the estimates were quite dynamic over time. And so now we've sort of hit on preliminary plans and what's the increase in the estimate from preliminary plans to now. So that report was added last year in the statute.
So just, we as legislators should make sure these reports are useful. In my, did you guys spend time making? Are they helpful to you at all? I'd like to know, I mean, you don't have to,
The 10G report?
yeah, I mean, maybe.
Do you want me to go?
Some of the 10G reports.
I mean,
Little sus.
Little what?
Sus.
Okay. That doesn't sound like a good thing.
For this program, I think they're tough because when towns get a grant, it's a capped grant. And so it's a little misleading that it's talking about the cost of the project sometimes. And really, they just have a capped grant of, let's say, $1 million. The project could be $10 million. And so then the next year, they get another substantial grant of a couple $1 million, and it looks like the estimate increased when it really didn't,
correct.
right? Most programs are our own projects, and we know what the project is going to be for a cost. And so any increases because of a bad estimate or inflation or whatever else.
Well, when I look at Rutland City and I see the redevelopment of Plaza near the depot, and the grant was 394,000 and they spent 7,900. That's a pretty weird estimate.
Oh, right here. So again, I would suspect that project started to spend money and then did not pursue that.
Yeah, they had to cancel. And that's the other thing, we're having a lot more projects getting canceled by communities than we've ever seen before, and for various reasons.
Right,
Is
but
it-
Rutland actually has a big project planned, so they may have just paused it or just done a little bit.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah,
so why do you think they're not doing, or why you're having so many cancellations? Is that cost? What do you think's going on with that?
I would say the majority of the cancellations that we are seeing are cost. And as you mentioned earlier, like, or maybe it was Senator White, that there's a lot of transition going on in local government all the time, that priorities seem to change a lot of times with select boards as well. You know, one select board wanted the project, the next select board comes in and doesn't support it. We have a project in the town of Richford that we're canceling right now that's been around for 20 something years, you know. So it's just like the priorities have changed. But I think, yeah, I would say that probably a lot of them have to do with the cost of the project. And towns know that they, you know, they face a potential payback if they get too deep into it. And so that's why you might see some of these smaller numbers. They spent a little bit of money and then decided it's not worth it. And the other thing too, I will mention is that this is a total amount. So some of these charges, like the $22,340 under Richmond, is more than likely V-Trans payroll time. Not anything the town spent, but we spent, you know, our folks charged to that particular project during the coordination. And then when we canceled it, it showed $2,300
oh,
spent.
that's
So
interesting. Okay, and these are, I'm sorry, John.
Well, I was gonna see if they'd answer your question about whether they find completing the 10G reports helpful.
They're tough.
my answer is no.
Yeah, I don't know that V-Trans uses them, and they're kind of a tough report to do because we run them and then they seem to be always issues with them. And so we have to manually correct them, and, you know, they're cumbersome, but, you know, if they're valuable to you folks, which is what they're meant to be, then that's what we want to do. And maybe to the point is whatever you think is useful.
So
I get the sense that the house that has more time spends more time with the 10G.
Yeah, we talked a lot
reports.
about the 10G.
In the Senate, I don't
Yes.
think we ever really
Very
did.
much.
Yeah.
and the information, where's the best place to get the same information for the 10G report? In the book? No.
Right, you'd have to go
You'd have to
line by
go-
line in the book and pick out your communities, you know, and say which ones were added, which ones were not. I think that was sort of the crux of these reports, just sort of get that quick information. what's being added, not gonna be there this year. And then generally an insight on the increase in costs.
Okay,
That's all I had.
It was good. Thank you.
so that's it for the Friday. But I don't know what they have planned upstairs, but generally I would say Fridays are the day we take stuff out from the back of the calendar on appointments. So I would,
I'm doing Jen Morrison's phase.
well, I don't know. I'm gonna go up and check, but they usually do them on Friday. So I think there might be a chance that somebody would say, you
Yes.
know, take the ones with the lines in under them and we're gonna do them. So just so you don't get up there
Thank you.